It was midnight one summer when a young family boarded a train. An 8-year-old boy, face pressed against the glass, watched the town he'd grown up in disappear into the night. For generations, his ancestors had called home the hills and hollows of western Pennsylvania, the farms and flatlands of the Great Lakes. Now, they were striking out west. At the other end of the line lay a place that almost seemed too good to be true. A land of mountains taller than he'd ever laid eyes upon, of vineyards and ranches blanketing rolling hills, buildings of adobe and red tile rooftops, waves crashing down on golden beaches. I didn't know it then, but in many ways, my family's move to the other side of the country made us just the latest in a long line of millions who had sought out a new life in the same place we would soon call home. As I watched the green hills turn into farmland, the farms to prairie, the prairie to desert, hearing the name of the place where I would spend the rest of my upbringing filled me with a sense of adventure, excitement, awe, a feeling of opportunity. Ever since it was first imagined, this same name would inspire countless others to embark on far more treacherous journeys in search of it. Spanish conquistadors, English pirates, Russian and Alaskan fur traders, black southern sharecroppers, Oklahoma farm workers, immigrants from Asia, from Latin America, gold seekers and aspiring entrepreneurs, actors hoping to strike it big on the silver screen, all have sought out a new life here, drawn by the same idealistic vision, the same grand dream that the name of their new home would inspire in them. Its name, of course, is California. It isn't just home to one of the largest economies on the planet, to as many people as nearly the entire country of Canada. California is home to some of the country's most spectacular natural scenery, a wide array of geographic diversity that gives us some truly breathtaking places. On this beautiful morning, I'm at Yosemite National Park, one of the country's most renowned natural areas. Hello and welcome to That Is Interesting. I'm your host, Carter. This is the U.S. Explained, episode 32, California. California is a huge state, the largest by far in population, one of the largest by land area, home to an incredible diversity of people, cultures, landscapes, climates, and regions. It has a fascinating history and is home to several of the largest cities in the country. As I was writing this video, it quickly became clear that it would be too long to comfortably include everything I wanted to talk about. Cutting out important material is just out of the question for me, so I decided to do something that I hadn't done yet in the US Explained, and likely will not do again in this series, and split the California episode into 2 parts. I wrote everything as one script, but will edit each episode one at a time. I'll release part 2 as soon as I'm done editing it, likely in the next few days. Feel free to watch each episode at your own pace, but I do hope that you choose to watch both parts and experience the whole story. Most states we've covered so far lie within just 1 or 2 kept-in climate zones. In what will probably become a common refrain throughout this video, California is different. The Golden State is home to 11. We've moved significantly further west than we've ever been so far in this series, and the western US, as you might remember from the climate of West Texas, is a vast array of starkly different climates. California, a huge state stretching as far south as Charleston, South Carolina, and as far north as Cape Cod, Massachusetts, perhaps exemplifies this best. It's home to climates ranging from the hot desert to tundra climates. In some cases, these climate zones are only some 50 miles apart. Yes, in California, hot deserts and tundra lie as far from each other as New York City lies from Trenton, New Jersey. I won't get too in the weeds in each of these climate zones, but the hot and cold desert climates marked by extremely little rainfall generally lie in the southeastern corner of the state, home to the state's 3 deserts, the Great Basin, Sonoran, and Mojave deserts, as well as in the dry southern end of the San Joaquin Valley. Parts of the Southern California coast around Los Angeles and San Diego, as well as the Inland Empire and San Joaquin Valley, are in the hot semi-arid and cold semi-arid climate zones. These are areas with low rainfall but not quite a desert, generally lying on the periphery of desert regions. When people say that LA is a desert, that is not quite right, but it is very hot and pretty dry. The High Sierra in the east, some of the tallest peaks in the United States, as well as Mount Shasta in the north, one of the southernmost volcanoes of the Cascades, are in the dry summer subarctic and, at their highest points, tundra or alpine climate zones. Subarctic climates have very long cold winters and brief cool summers. Tundra climates are even colder, with at least 1 month each year above freezing, but no months above 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. Most of the state, though, sits in the hot, warm, and cold summer Mediterranean climate zones, mostly the hot and warm ones. Coastal areas and the lower peaks of the Sierra Nevada are typically in the warm Mediterranean zone, while coastal mountain areas further inland, the Sierra foothills, and the Sacramento Valley are mostly in the hot summer Mediterranean zone. The Mediterranean climate defines California, marked by hot, very dry summers and wet winters with mild temperatures. Outside of California, it stretches up the west coast into western Oregon and Washington and can be found in central Chile, the South African Cape, and western Australia around Perth. Unsurprisingly, outside of California, it's most common in the actual Mediterranean. Coastal Portugal, Spain, France, the Balkans, Greece, Turkey, North Africa, and the Middle East possess similar climates. You may have picked up on another commonality. Many of these are home to some of the best wine-growing regions on the planet. Mediterranean parts of California have massive temperature swings from day to night that can surprise people from other parts of the country. You might have to wear a jacket in the morning, take it off during the day, and put it back on at night. With mountains right on the coast, coastal areas can have far more mild, consistent temperatures than inland valleys just on the other side of the mountains. I grew up in California's central coast, and driving between the region's valleys and beaches, especially in the summertime, you could see temperatures change as much as 20 or 30 degrees on a short drive. The state ranks 18th by dew point, a measurement of humidity that shows how sticky the air actually feels. The state's far less humid than the states of the American South, but generally less dry than the Mountain West further inland. Mountain and desert areas are far more dry than the coast and Central Valley. With 22.97 inches of rainfall on average, California ranks 40th in terms of precipitation, making it the country's 11th driest state, after pretty much just the states of the Mountain West. But this statistic masks a huge diversity in precipitation by region. Climatically, the state's northern coast is almost like the Pacific Northwest. The town of Gasket near the Oregon border gets over 90 inches of rain on average per year. The deserts of California on the opposite side of the state are by far the driest place in the country. Death Valley National Park's Furnace Creek records an average annual rainfall of just 2 inches, making it the driest spot in the entire United States. Stay tuned because this remarkable national park holds a number of other extreme records. With 3.76 inches of snowfall per year on average, California is the 9th least snowy state. But again, this is very regional. Much of the state never gets any snow, while the Sierra Nevada can have snow almost all year round. The Soda Springs weather station on Donner Pass records 411 inches of snow in an average year. This is more than any other state's snowiest station after just Washington, Oregon, and Utah. It's common to never experience any snowfall where you live, but be able to go on a short drive up into the mountains in the wintertime and have a snowball fight. With an average temperature of 61.17 degrees Fahrenheit or 16.2 degrees Celsius, it's the 10th hottest state in the country, after much of the deep south and southwest. Again, this is very regional. The High Sierra are as cold as northern Minnesota, while the deserts stretching between it and Arizona are the hottest part of the country. Death Valley again sets a record with temperature. It's the hottest place not just in California, not just in the United States, not even just in North America, but it's the hottest spot on the entire planet. On July 10th, 1913, the temperature at Furnace Creek was recorded to be a shocking 134 degrees Fahrenheit or 56.7 degrees Celsius, the hottest officially ever recorded, though there is some controversy with a hotter measurement in Libya that was found to be inaccurate. Average Julys in the park regularly get up to 115, dangerously high temperatures. Most of the coast and inland valleys where most Californians live are not as hot as the desert park, but generally hotter than a lot of the country. It's the 6th sunniest state in the country, getting more sunlight on average than any other state besides Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, and Hawaii, and it gets 146 clear days on average, 4th after Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. The deserts are the sunniest part of the state, while Northern California, particularly its coast, gets quite a bit more gray. This state of extreme weather differences is infamously disaster prone. Much of the time I lived in California, the state was in the throes of a devastating drought. The state is generally drought prone, but from 2011 to 2017, a particularly severe drought struck the Golden State, straining the state's water supply, crippling agriculture, and killing over 100 million trees. At its peak, the drought, which had mostly cleared up by 2019, marked the driest period in the entire recorded history of the state. Reservoirs across the state dried up. I remember walking in the bed of what had once been a lake and seeing an old road that used to run through it before the dam was built. Though conditions have mostly recovered, it continues to raise serious questions about the viability of the state's often precarious climate and natural environment to house such an enormous population. Hand in hand with droughts come wildfires. In 2023, for example, California had over 7,000 wildfires, the most of any state. Now, most of these are quite small, but every year a few burn massive swaths of wilderness, blackening the skies, forcing evacuations, and in the worst cases, taking lives and destroying homes. The same year, more than 300,000 acres of California burned, the most of any state, and it possesses by far the highest risk for homes. 1.2 million houses in the state are deemed at risk from extreme wildfires. Some of the worst include the August complex, the largest in state history, which in 2020 burned over 1 million hectares of Northern California. The Camp Fire, which struck the Sierra Nevada foothills in 2018 and destroyed the town of Paradise, nearly wiping a city of 26,000 people off the map and killing 83. It remains the state's deadliest blaze. The most expensive were the twin Palisades and Eaton fires, which struck the Los Angeles area in January of 2025, the year I'm writing this. The fires burned into the city, destroying most of the LA neighborhood of Pacific Palisades and the suburb of Altadena. 31 people were killed, 16,000 buildings were destroyed, and total damage surpassed $20 billion, making it the most expensive fire in U.S. history. Wildfire risk has led the state's fire insurance and electric bills to skyrocket and has contributed to spiraling housing prices and costs of living, making California arguably the epicenter of a national affordability crisis. The other major natural disaster I'll mention today are, of course, earthquakes. Along with Alaskans, Californians have the highest chances of facing an earthquake in the country. Here's a frightening statistic. In most of the state, the odds a major earthquake will strike in the next 100 years are greater than 95%. While most of the mainland U.S. sits on the North American plate, most of the California coast, from the Imperial Valley to Cape Mendocino, sits on a different tectonic plate, the Pacific plate. They grind together along the San Andreas Fault, which runs down the length of the state, passing right through where most Californians live, coming incredibly close to the Los Angeles area, and running just a mile or two from the city limits of San Francisco. In 1906, the deadliest earthquake in U.S. history destroyed most of the city of San Francisco and killed over 3,000 people. This 7.9 quake was particularly bad due to the fire that broke out in its stead. Other major earthquakes include two in Los Angeles, the 1971 San Fernando earthquake and 1994 Northridge earthquake, as well as the Bay Area's 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. Many lives were likely saved due to the fact that this 6.9 quake struck during the World Series, and with two Bay Area teams, the San Francisco Giants and Oakland A's, facing off, many people were at home watching the game rather than in their cars. Many Californians know that the state is overdue for a particularly bad quake to strike, and sometimes talk about the potential for the big one to hit. On the bright side, California is at the forefront of earthquake-resistant architecture. You'll find many houses are single-story and have no basements for this reason, something unusual in other parts of the country. Southern California mansions, in fact, are often single-story complexes that sprawl across hilltops rather than reach up several stories. The entire state is located in the Pacific time zone, the first we've covered in this time zone, and its postal abbreviation is CA. Though Alaska's Aleutian Islands are closer to the far western atolls of Hawaii, the closest point in the lower 48 to the distant island state is Point Arena on the northern California coast, 2,285 miles from the Big Island. San Francisco is the closest major U.S. city to Hawaii, and its airport is often a jumping-off point to get to the state. California is nicknamed the Golden State. The nickname, of course, comes from the California Gold Rush, which transformed it from a sparsely populated, newly won possession, not even yet a territory, to a state home to hundreds of thousands of people, and kickstarted a rush westward that would bring Americans from the East Coast to travel thousands of miles away, settling not just in California, but eventually the rest of the West Coast and Mountain West. The state has a white license plate with the word California written in cursive in red. We're moving west, so we're getting into some of my favorite state flags in the country. California's, in my opinion, is among the very best. It's white with a red stripe on the bottom. A California grizzly bear stands atop grass over the words California Republic. A single red star sits in the upper left corner from the flag of an 1836 revolt by Mexican Californios against Mexico's rule. The bear flag itself is based on the flag of a successful independence movement that toppled Mexican military control around the town of Sonoma during the Mexican-American War. Known as the Bear Flag Revolt for their flag, the California Republic for a few weeks functioned as an independent country, though it controlled very little of California, really just Sonoma. The state's flag is an iconic symbol. Californians have strong state pride, and you see the flag everywhere, flying outside houses, on bumper stickers, and all over t-shirts and hats. California arguably has among the strongest senses of identity of any state, and the flag has become a nationally recognized symbol. California is a made-up word, created by Spanish author Garcia Ordóñez de Montevaldo for a fantasy book, published around 1496 called Las Sergas muy esforzado caballero Esplandian. In English, The Exploits of the Very Powerful Cavalier Esplandian. Montevaldo wrote this in the book: "Know that to the right hand of the Indies was an island called California. This fantastical island, ruled by a kingdom of black women, took its name from its ruler, Queen Calafia. The character's name is likely a take on the Arabic word Khalifa or Caliph, which was a well-known term in Spain, the country having just emerged from the Muslim-ruled Al-Andalus, and picked up a number of Arabic words. Montevaldo's book was popular in the early 1500s when Spanish conquistadors were first beginning to explore the New World. In 1535, conquistador Hernán Cortés landed on what appeared to be a large island in the Pacific, just beyond Mexico. Thinking the ocean was far smaller than it is, this island, he thought, must lie on the right hand of the Indies. He named it California, after the island in Montevaldo's book. It was still a ways from the Indies, it turned out, and was a peninsula, not an island, but the name California and the misconception that it was an island stuck. As Spain colonized the peninsula and eventually pushed their presence beyond it, the name came to refer to the land lying north of the peninsula as well. In 1804, Spain split the province in half, administering the peninsula as Lower or Baja California, and the land to the north as Alta or Upper California. They would also sometimes call it Nueva or New California. The name would stick under Mexican rule, but when Americans took over, they dropped the Alta, giving the region the name California, though it was a name first applied to just Baja. This is a video I've been looking forward to making for a long time. I grew up in the rural central coast of California, and though I don't live there anymore, it's the state I probably know the best. I visited most of it. I started and ended my U.S. Explained tour here, spending a good 5 weeks crisscrossing the state, visiting its north and south, its coast and mountains and valleys, a number of its national parks, and each of its major cities. I'm excited to share my home with all of you. Most, though not all, of the photos and clips used in both of these videos were taken by me, including each of the thumbnails. If you have a guess as to where they were, go leave a comment and let me know. Besides the personal reasons I'm looking forward to this video, California is exciting for other reasons. Namely, it feels like a turning point in the series. The states we've covered so far are mostly in the eastern half of the country. We haven't even done every state east of the Mississippi so far. Only one state, Texas, really lies fully west of even the Missouri River. With Texas's westernmost tip, we've dipped just into the Mountain West, but only slightly so. Now we're jumping over all of that, landing clear for the first time on the Pacific coast. The fact that a state so far away from where most Americans lived entered the Union so early is testament to just how remarkable its story is. Of course, it is far and away the most populous state in the country. Just over halfway through the U.S. Explained, we will never cover a place in this series as populous as California. Texas, in second place, doesn't even really come within spitting distance. 1 in 8 Americans are Californians, and this state, the global capital of the entertainment, media, and technology industries, plays an enormous role in the global economy and really world history, today receiving more visitors than any other state in the country and holding the title of the 4th largest economy on the planet. Its influence is honestly impossible to overstate. California is a giant, whether we're talking population or land area, taking up 155,779 square miles or 403,446 square kilometers. It's the country's 3rd largest state by land area and the 2nd largest in the lower 48. It's only surpassed by the significantly larger Alaska and Texas, and is larger than Montana by about 10,000 square miles. Most of the country's largest states lie in the American West, but even so, California is noticeably larger than most of its neighbors. If you overlaid it on the East Coast, it would take up part or all of 13 different states, stretching from Georgia and South Carolina to Massachusetts. If California were its own country, it would be the world's 58th largest, about the size of Paraguay or Sweden. It is, of course, the most populous state in the country. 39.43 million people call California home, just under an eighth of the entire country's population. For comparison, Texas, the country's 2nd most populous state, is home to 31.29 million, 8 million fewer residents. You could even give Texas another Houston, the state's largest urban area, plus all its suburbs, and it would still be more than 2 million short. Its population is almost double that of New York, the country's 4th most populous state. I'll give another example. Sacramento, home to 1.9 million people in it and its suburbs, would be the largest urban area in its state if it were located in any of these 34 different states. San Diego's urban area has 1 million more people than it. Add the two together, and they combined are home to less people than the San Francisco Bay Area. Double the population of the Bay Area, and it is still home to less people than the Los Angeles urban area. Los Angeles County alone is home to 9.7 million people, meaning a single California county has more people than 40, yes, you heard me right, 40 different states, including New Jersey, Virginia, Washington, and Arizona. If it were a country, it would be the 38th most populous in the world, in between Canada and Uzbekistan, the 7th largest in the Western Hemisphere, and the 4th largest in North America. In fact, the U.S.'s northern neighbor, the 2nd largest country on the planet by land area, only surpassed California in population as recently as 2023. In terms of population density, it ranks 11th, with 250 people per square mile or 97 per square kilometer, making it more densely populated than Illinois and less than Ohio, slightly behind the territory of the Northern Mariana Islands. Needless to say, this is a remarkably high density for the state with the country's 3rd largest land area, and is similar to that of Honduras, Senegal, or Spain. California sits on the country's west coast along the Pacific Ocean. Though the term Mountain West usually refers to just the mountain states east of California, Oregon, and Washington, eastern parts of the state beyond the Sierra Nevada have a lot in common culturally and geographically with neighboring mountain states like Nevada and the states of the Southwest like Arizona. It borders 3 states, one Mexican state, and the ocean. The Pacific lies to its west, Oregon to its north, Nevada to its east, Arizona to its southeast, and the Mexican state of Baja California to its south. California's border with Oregon begins at the Pacific Ocean just north of the town of Smith River, near where the river the same name flows out to sea. The larger town of Crescent City, slightly further south, is the northernmost major town on the California coast. The border follows the 42nd parallel, Oregon sitting into its north, for 216 miles or 348 kilometers, cutting through the rough, sparsely populated, forested terrain of the Coast Ranges, Klamath Mountains, Cascades, and the high desert of the Modoc Plateau that lies beyond them, passing through Goose Lake, the 3rd largest lake in the state, the southern part of the lake sitting in California. It continues until, at a remote spot in the Great Basin called the Surprise Valley, it reaches the 120th meridian west and turns south, Nevada sitting to its east. It continues south for 206 miles through the Modoc Plateau and Great Basin. As it nears the Sierra Nevada, which run northwest to southeast, it passes just outside Reno, Nevada's 2nd largest urban area. Reno's suburbs, and in some cases city limits, directly reach the border, but suburban Reno as of yet has not crossed into California. Just in the mountains, the border reaches Lake Tahoe, where it turns southeast, now a diagonal border with Nevada lying to the northeast. Much of the shoreline of the country's largest lake outside the Great Lakes by volume is developed. The California town of Kings Beach lies opposite Nevada's Crystal Bay and Incline Village on the north side of the lake, while on the south side, the California town of South Lake Tahoe, the lake's largest city, sits directly across from the town of State Line, Nevada. It cuts diagonally through the remote eastern Sierra and Mojave Desert, at times getting just 20 or so miles from the outskirts of Las Vegas, until reaching the Colorado River north of the town of Needles. It follows the river and its large reservoir Lake Havasu through the Mojave and Sonoran deserts, a number of towns lying on either side. The small city of Yuma, Arizona's 3rd largest urban area, lies opposite the tiny California suburb of Winter Haven. Just outside Yuma, the border leaves the Colorado and runs west, tilting slightly southwest. Now an international border, the Mexican state of Baja California sits to the south. It slices through the desert, Imperial Valley, and Coast Ranges for 140 miles or 226 kilometers until it meets the Pacific Ocean at the San Diego suburb of Imperial Beach. A number of towns sit on either side of the international California-Baja border. In the agricultural Imperial Valley, the California town of Calexico is fairly small, home to just 38,000 people, but it sits across from the much larger and similarly named Baja city of Mexicali. Mexicali, the capital city of Baja California, is home to 1 million people in its metro area, making it Mexico's 14th largest metropolis. The total cross-border metro is home to around 1.1 million people on both sides of the international line. 10.4 million people cross at Calexico's west border checkpoint every year, making it the 6th busiest border crossing in the United States, another 4.9 million at its east crossing. On the coast, at the very western edge of the U.S.-Mexico border, 2 major cities, San Diego and Tijuana, are divided by the international boundary. San Diego is the core of an American urban area, home to around 3 million residents, 15th in the country. And while there aren't great urban area stats for Mexican cities, Tijuana's metro area is the country's 6th largest, home to 2.1 million people. By city limits, it's Mexico's 2nd largest city after just Mexico City. Altogether, with 5.1 million people in and around San Diego and Tijuana, it's the country's 2nd largest cross-border metro area after just Detroit and the Canadian city of Windsor, and the largest metro area spanning the U.S.-Mexico border. The crossing between the 2 cities at the San Diego neighborhood of San Isidro is the busiest border crossing in North America, some 31.8 million people crossing between the two countries there annually, and the second busiest international crossing on the planet after the Woodlands checkpoint between Singapore and Malaysia. On top of that, another port of entry between the cities at San Diego's Otay Mesa neighborhood is the fourth busiest crossing into the United States, with 11.9 million people crossing there annually. After Alaska and, interestingly enough, Hawaii, the islands of which extend quite a bit further west than you might think, California is the third longest state in the country, stretching 827 miles, or 1,330 kilometers, from its two furthest points. Much of this length is north to south, and the 10 degrees of latitude between the Oregon and Mexican borders make a world of difference in terms of temperature and climate. On top of that, the state's rugged, mountainous topography creates stark climate differences over very short distances. Mountains often block winds carrying moisture from the ocean, causing rain to fall on the coastal sides of the peaks, while the other sides are left with only dry air. This rain shadow effect is evident across not just California, but the entire West Coast. Coastal regions of California are generally much more lush and green than the drier inland valleys on the other side of the mountains. In Southern California, cross over the mountains from LA or San Diego, and you can watch shockingly quickly as the oaks and chaparral of these Mediterranean coastal regions give way to the Joshua trees, sand, and sun-bleached rock faces of the Mojave Desert. All that's to say, California possesses, on top of the most people in the country, one of the most geographically diverse landscapes in the nation. In terms of its physical geography, its regions are far more distinct from one another than any state we've covered so far in this series, even Texas. And though you could maybe make the case for one or two, it's hard to argue that any state quite matches the sheer geographic diversity of California. It's easy to see why it's the state with the most national parks in the country, 9. Then there are the cultural differences within the state, which add an entirely different layer of distinction. First, there's the age-old way to divide up the state into Northern and Southern California, revolving around two enormous centers of population, San Francisco in the north and Los Angeles in the south, separated by 348 miles of mountains, the distance from New York City to North Carolina or Toronto. It makes sense that these two major metropolises and the two cities closer to each of them, Sacramento and San Diego, turned out culturally very different. Their economies are very different. Northern California is more tied to finance and technology, Southern California to entertainment and media. These areas were settled and developed for different reasons and have different landscapes and climates. Northern California is much cooler and foggier, receives significantly more rainfall, is home to redwood forests, raging rivers, and cold, pebbly beaches. In the south, beaches are sandy and sunny. Palm trees line the coast. Weather is hot and the landscape is more golden than green. It's a good basic distinction, but we're going to go more in depth. I'm from the Central Coast, a region that claims neither north nor south, and it doesn't provide a clear answer for the Central Valley or Sierra Nevada. So while the split between Northern and Southern California is real, I'm going to break down the state's regions into a bit more detail. I've got another video on the state's regional differences if you're interested in learning more. We'll begin with the state's north coast, starting at the Oregon border and continuing south until you reach the wine country valleys of Napa, Sonoma, and Santa Rosa, north of the San Francisco Bay. The region is almost entirely covered in mountains. A collection of different mountain ranges called the Coast Ranges run north to south down much of the state, continuing up the Pacific coast into Oregon. Further inland, another range of tall, rugged peaks called the Klamath Mountains sit between the Coast Ranges and the Cascades. The very north of California is mountainous practically the whole way across, with dense forests, tall mountains, a lush green landscape, and raging wild rivers like the Smith, Klamath, Trinity, Mad, Eel, and Russian rivers. This part of the state looks more like the Pacific Northwest than other parts of the state further south, and is culturally quite similar as well. The colder and foggier North Coast is sometimes included in wider interpretations of the multi-state region, and certainly has a strong and independent identity. Along with parts of the Shasta Cascade region to the east, as well as parts of southern Oregon, some people in the North Coast have, feeling very different from the rest of California, pushed to become their own 51st state called the State of Jefferson. They even have their own flag showing a gold mining pan. Though a few counties have voted in favor of it, for a part of a state to break away is a very difficult process, making it a very unlikely possibility. By far the most rural part of the California coast, this has historically been logging country. Today, with the legalization of marijuana in the state, it's thought to be the largest cannabis growing region in the United States. Many communities are small logging and milling towns or coastal fishing villages. Particularly in the valleys of the South, the wine industry is big, and vineyards fill its thin inland valleys. Highway 1, California's famous coast highway, connects the towns of the coast like Crescent City, Fort Bragg, home to a sea glass beach, and Mendocino.
Now, between the San Francisco Bay Area and the Humboldt Bay Area, way up north, is a stretch of coastline with not too many people. It's a beautiful area of Northern California. I'm in Mendocino County right now, and the main population center in this stretch of coast is Fort Bragg. This is a nice little seaside town with beautiful, colorful houses, old water towers, and California's famous glass beach, where an old bottling factory was nearby, and the glass from the factory washed up and created a bunch of glass stones mixed in within the sand. This is a nice little beach town, and yeah, one of the main little specks of population along this coastline in a pretty rural part of the state.
Other major towns include Ukiah and Willits, located in small inland valleys, and Fortuna, a lumber milling town on the Eel River. The largest population center surrounds Humboldt Bay, a large enclosed estuary that's the largest bay between San Francisco Bay and Puget Sound. The bayside city of Eureka is the largest, and nearby towns like McKinleyville and the college town of Arcata, home to Cal Poly Humboldt, add to the population around Humboldt Bay. Though some of the largest towns in the region, they're far smaller than many cities in other parts of the state.
The very westernmost part of the state is up near its border with Oregon, far, far north of the Bay Area. The westernmost point is a huge outcropping of land known as Cape Mendocino, a rugged stretch of coastline known as the Lost Coast. Located on the Cape, the population center of California's far north is Humboldt Bay. This is a massive enclosed estuary, an excellent natural harbor, and the site of the largest city in the region, Eureka, where I am right now. This is a small city with some Victorian architecture and a large maritime presence. Lots of fishing, lots of boats out on the water. The very far north of California feels a lot like the Pacific Northwest. It's cold, it's chilly, it's foggy. You got pine trees, redwoods, and the whole area is surrounded by water. This is a totally different part of the state and really one of my favorite places in California to visit. A super overlooked part of the Golden State, especially compared to Southern California.
South of Humboldt Bay, Cape Mendocino juts further west than any other point in the state. The mountains of the King Range, the section of the coast ranges around Cape Mendocino, dive into the ocean at such steep slopes that the one couldn't be built along it. And as such, it's incredibly undeveloped and wild, known as the Lost Coast. Redwood National Park, between Humboldt Bay and Crescent City, protects some of the tallest trees on the planet. Hyperion, a tree hidden deep in the forests of the national park, is 380 feet or 115 meters tall, the tallest tree and in fact tallest living organism in the world. Outside of the national park, dozens of state parks and national monuments provide access to beautiful redwood forests up and down the state, but particularly in the North Coast. The famed Avenue of the Giants is a scenic drive through much of this redwood empire, and the area is even home to some trees that can be driven through.
The tallest trees in America are right here in California. Redwoods exist in the state from way up north all the way down to Big Sur, but here in the very north of the coast in between Eureka and Crescent City is Redwood National Park. This park preserves some of the tallest trees in the world, including some amazing groves of old-growth redwoods, and is one of California's 9 national parks, and in my opinion, really one of its most spectacular.
Clear Lake, located in a valley in the Coast Ranges, is one of the largest lakes in the state and one of the oldest in the continent. Further inland sits an even more sparsely populated area, the Shasta Cascade region. Stretching from the Klamath Mountains east to the Nevada border, it includes the southern tip of the Cascades, the range of tall, solitary volcanic peaks that extend through Oregon and Washington all the way to British Columbia. The second tallest of these volcanoes, after just Mount Rainier, is Mount Shasta, an enormous snow-capped peak that looms over the horizon, visible at times from as far as 100 miles away. Most of the towns in the Shasta region follow the upper reaches of the Sacramento River, and with it the I-5, the major interstate highway up the west coast, including Wairika, Weed, Mount Shasta, and the largest city in the region, Redding. Though Redding still sits at the foot of the mountains, beyond it, the canyon of the Sacramento River widens into a larger valley, the Sacramento Valley, the northern half of the state's massive Central Valley. Flowing into the Sacramento, the Pitt River flows out of the Modoc Plateau, a high volcanic plateau formed from ancient lava flows. During years of high rainfall, Goose Lake, the state's third largest but somewhat intermittent lake on the Oregon border, will occasionally spill over into the Pitt River. Further east, the Great Basin stretches in from Nevada. The basin is endorheic, meaning water that falls into it never flows out to sea. Its rivers eventually run dry or end in lakes and salt flats from where they evaporate. The Great Basin is the largest endorheic basin in North America and takes up much of the American West. A significant amount of it is located in California. The endorheic Honey Lake near the Nevada border is one such example and is one of the largest lakes in the state. These plateau and desert regions east of the Cascades make up one of the most remote stretches of California. There are two major towns, Susanville and Alturas, home to just a couple thousand people each. Past the Cascades, it's culturally and geographically very similar to eastern Oregon and northern Nevada, remote, sparsely populated, and very out of the way. Most of the land is made up of mountains, deserts, lava fields, salt flats, and lakes, as well as some farming and ranching land. Lassen Peak, the southern tip of the Cascades, is the planet's largest plug dome volcano, an active volcano whose bubbling fumaroles, mud pots, and steaming hot springs have led to its protection as Lassen Volcanic National Park. Running from Lassen south to Tehachapi Pass, where they meet the transverse ranges, which run east to west along the south and central coasts of the state, the Sierra Nevada make up one of the most prominent mountain ranges in the United States, the high, rocky, and snowy backbone of California. The famous Pacific Crest Trail, running from the Canadian to Mexican border, follows much of the mountain range. Along with the Rockies and Cascades, this alpine region is part of the American Cordillera, a chain of mountain ranges that stretches from Alaska to Patagonia, including all the peaks of the American West. Even so, it is one of its most prominent ranges. To its east lies the Great Basin. To its west, its snowmelt feeds the agriculturally essential Central Valley. Between these two hot weather regions, the Sierras are cold and snowy, home to world-famous ski areas like Mammoth and Tahoe. This was the site of the California Gold Rush and was for a time its population center, home to countless mining towns. After the brief mining boom, though, many such towns faded away, ghost towns remaining as relics of their boom and bust past. The most populous parts of the region are the suburbs of Sacramento that reach into the foothills as well as the shores of Lake Tahoe. Sitting along the border with Nevada, California's second largest lake is a stunningly beautiful place, a popular vacation destination, and one of just 6 places in the U.S. to have hosted the Olympic Games, along with another California location, the city of Los Angeles. The fact that it's California's second largest lake by surface area is impressive enough, but Tahoe stretches to a depth of 1,645 feet, or 501 meters, deeper than any lake in the United States except for Oregon's Crater Lake. Altogether, this means that Lake Tahoe contains a larger volume of water than any lake in the U.S. other than the Great Lakes, and makes it one of the largest lakes by volume in the world. The lakeside resort town of South Lake Tahoe is one of the largest population centers in the Sierra Nevada, along with Truckee, which sits not far from the lake along the Truckee River, which carries its waters out of the mountains into Reno and the Great Basin.
Way up in the high Sierras in California, split between California and Nevada, Lake Tahoe is one of the largest lakes in America by volume, surpassed only by the Great Lakes. Now, it doesn't look like a huge lake. It's a big enough lake, but it's so deep, the second deepest in the United States, that this lake is just filled with water. Like I said, only the Great Lakes surpass it. It is a beautiful area, an incredible part of California, and is a huge draw for recreation with a ton of visitors coming for both winter sports and recreation on the lake in the summer.
The nearby Donner Pass is the primary route across the mountains and was the path many settlers took to reach the state on the California Trail, including the pass's unfortunate namesakes. The tallest peaks of the range, known as the High Sierra, are home to 3 national parks. Sequoia and Kings Canyon are twin alpine parks protecting the state's giant sequoia trees, a type of redwood found only in the Sierras. While the coast redwoods are limited to the California coast, sequoias are the largest trees on the planet by volume. Sequoia National Park's General Sherman, taking up 52,500 cubic feet, or 1,487 cubic meters of tree, is the largest tree on the planet. Another famed sequoia tree, General Grant, is located in Kings Canyon. Sequoia and a neighboring national forest are home as well to Mount Whitney. The enormous peak is the tallest mountain in California, as well as the highest point in all of the lower 48 states. Stretching 14,505 feet or 4,421 meters into the sky, it towers over every other mountain in the U.S. save for 10, each of which are in Alaska. Nowhere else in the contiguous U.S. reaches as high as Whitney. Then, of course, there's Yosemite. Along with Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon, it's arguably one of the most iconic national parks in the country, and one of the most famous places on the planet. Its centerpiece is the Yosemite Valley, a stunning valley hemmed in by towering glacier-carved granite monoliths like El Capitan and Half Dome, waterfalls like Yosemite Falls, one of the tallest cataracts in the country, spilling down their sides into the valley below. Bringing in 4.1 million people a year, it's one of the most visited national parks in the country. It's impossible to say that it's not worth the hype. It may be highly trafficked, but few places in the United States match the sheer beauty of Yosemite. California has 9 national parks. Each of them are incredible, but there is one that is truly one of the most iconic that there is. That is Yosemite National Park. High up in the Sierra Nevada, this glacial valley is truly astonishing. It's easily one of the most beautiful places, not only California, but the entire United States overall. And it's part of what helped inspire the creation of the National Park Service. Part of the inspiration for really helping change the way that Americans and the country interacted with nature and our natural world overall. This is beautiful. It's one of the country's most well-known and most popular national parks, and really an incredible piece of high mountain wilderness, beautiful valleys down below. California is easily one of the most beautiful states in America, and Yosemite is just one example of why. Rivers like the Feather, Yuba, American, Tuolumne, Merced, Kings, and others flow out from the Sierra Nevada snowmelt into the Central Valley, feeding the important waterways of the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers and making possible the agricultural miracle that is the Central Valley. Many of these rivers are dammed in the lower foothills of the mountains, creating reservoirs that, through the California Aqueduct, provide water to much of the state and are popular recreation destinations for Californians from the Central Valley. Indeed, though few people live in the Sierra Nevada, the mountains are easily accessible to the millions of Californians who live within just a few hours of them, and their forests and peaks are popular to visit. The same cannot be said of the valleys to the east of the mountains. This region, the Eastern Sierra, is home to just 31,000 people, despite taking up more land than Massachusetts and Connecticut combined. Dry, desolate, cut off from the state's centers of population by some of the highest peaks in the country, the Eastern Sierra is one of the most forgotten yet stunning places I've ever been. Southeast of Tahoe, the spectacular Mono Lake, the 4th largest in the state, is home to beautiful chimney-like rock formations called tufa towers, formed from a buildup of minerals underwater that have since emerged from the lake as water levels have dropped. On the other side of the Sierra Nevada is a region known as the Eastern Sierra. This is part of the Great Basin. Water that falls in its basins and ranges never flow out to sea. Instead, in areas like Mono Lake behind me, precipitation re-enters the water cycle through evaporation. This is an incredibly sparsely populated part of the state. There are only a few small towns scattered throughout the valleys of the Eastern Sierra. Right now we're up around 6,000, 7,000 feet. Death Valley, also part of this region, is well below sea level, the lowest point in North America overall. This is Mono Lake. It's twice as salty as the ocean. It's the 4th largest lake in the state of California, and it's pretty incredible. These pillars you see behind me are tufa towers. They're formed from underwater springs that are rich with calcium.
This calcium water comes up and creates these buildups that create these chimney-like structures jutting out of the water. It's an incredibly beautiful part of the state that's pretty out of the way and not very many people are familiar with. Beautiful valleys, deserts, and meadows collect snowmelt from the backside of the mountains. They are high peaks rising above the low valley floors like impenetrable walls. The Owens Valley at the base of Mount Whitney carries water into Owens Lake, a large lake which was dried up to provide water to the then fast-growing city of Los Angeles. It's home to a few small towns like Bishop and Lone Pine, some of the region's rare inhabited settlements. The Alabama Hills, a ridge of beautiful desert rock formations, sit at the foot of Whitney and are a popular film site for Western movies. Welcome to the Alabama Hills. This is an incredible series of rock formations, this range of rocky hills at the foothills of the Sierras on the east side of the mountain range in California's Owens Valley. Right behind me, that peak right there is Mount Whitney. That is the tallest point in the entire lower 48. Only a few peaks in Alaska surpass it. Perhaps what's most impressive about it is just how close we are to Death Valley. Death Valley is just one valley over, and that's the lowest point in all of North America. Some of the lowest and highest points in the country sit a mere miles apart right here in the state of California. A bristlecone pine in the region called Methuselah is over 4,800 years old, making it the oldest tree in the world. A valley or two to the east sits Death Valley. California's largest national park holds a number of records. It's the driest spot in the country, the hottest place in the world, and on top of that all, it's the lowest place in North America. A salt flat called Badwater Basin sits lower than any other spot on the continent at 282 feet or 86 meters below sea level. Perhaps the most impressive part of it all, Badwater is just 86 miles or 139 kilometers from the peak of Mount Whitney. That's right. The highest spot in the lower 48 and the lowest spot on the continent are as close to one another as New York City and Philadelphia. Death Valley is a strange and otherworldly landscape, an extreme place unlike anywhere else you'll visit. It's part of the Mojave, one of three deserts that take up much of southeastern California. The northernmost of the three, the Great Basin Desert, the more central Mojave Desert, and the Sonoran Desert in the very south of the state. Much of each of these deserts lie within the Great Basin, precipitation that falls there never reaching the ocean. But the northern area known as the Great Basin Desert is a cold desert, while the Mojave and Sonoran deserts are hot deserts. The section of the Sonoran Desert around the Colorado River is called the Colorado Desert, and it takes up all of the Sonoran Desert within the state. The deserts of California, especially the Mojave and Colorado deserts, collectively make up the hottest and driest region in the entire country, a sun-bleached land of yellow, scrub-covered valley floors, black lava fields, lone dark mountains rising above desolate basins, salt pans, and the scattered ghost town. Culturally similar to neighboring desert regions in Arizona and Nevada, it has a lot in common with the Southwest and is sometimes considered a part of that broad multi-state region. With so much sunlight, it's a center of solar energy production, helping make California the country's largest solar-producing state. There's a massive military presence in the deserts of California. With so much vast open land, it's a prime location for the military to test weapons, and the region's low humidity makes it a great place to store equipment for long periods of time. Huge military installations like Fort Irwin, Edwards Air Force Base, Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake, the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center 29 Palms, and Chocolate Mountain Aerial Gunnery Range contribute to a huge military presence in this part of the state, which is home as well to the Mojave Air and Spaceport, a major rocket launch site. Many residents live in the Antelope and Victor Valleys. The towns of Lancaster and Palmdale, and further east, Victorville, Hesperia, and Apple Valley are collectively home to hundreds of thousands of people. On the edge of the Mojave, they've grown in large part due to their proximity to Los Angeles and the millions of people who live on the other side of the mountains. One major river, the Mojave, runs through this part of the desert, flowing mostly underground before eventually evaporating. On the other side of the desert, along the Arizona border, towns like Needles and Blythe line the Colorado River, a ribbon of dark water winding through the desert. Without the Colorado, the desert would be practically uninhabitable, and California a far less populous state than it is today. Beginning high in the Colorado Rockies,
The river carries Rocky Mountain snowmelt through the southwest, carving the majestic Grand Canyon before forming the California-Arizona border. Lake Havasu on the border and other reservoirs further north, Lake Mojave, Lake Mead, and Lake Powell, provide water and electricity for much of Southern California and the Southwest, and made the rapid growth the regions have experienced over the last century possible. Along the river on both the California and Arizona sides, farms fed by the river are an oasis in the desert. It all comes at a cost, though. No longer does the fifth longest river in the country, surpassed by only the Missouri, Mississippi, Yukon, and Rio Grande, make it to its mouth in the Gulf of California, instead running dry before it reaches Mexico. Halfway from the Colorado to the Pacific, in the middle of the Colorado Desert, lies the farmland of the Imperial Valley. This low-lying desert was transformed into an agricultural valley, home to towns like Calexico, Brawley, and El Centro, thanks to canals carrying water from the Colorado River. A storm in 1905, however, caused these canals to burst and flood the Salton Sink, a large desert basin that lay below sea level. Ever since, the Sink, now California's largest lake, has been known as the Salton Sea. On the north side of the Salton Sea, the Coachella Valley is a popular desert resort area. Hundreds of thousands of people collectively live in between cities like Palm Springs, Indio, Palm Desert, Coachella, and Cathedral City. Overlooking the valley, straddling both the Mojave and Colorado deserts, sits one of my favorite national parks, Joshua Tree. This huge park protects a beautiful stretch of California desert, home to mountains, canyons, large rock outcroppings, and covered in their namesake plant, the Joshua tree, a large, strange-looking succulent that's ubiquitous across much of the desert. I'm in the Mojave right now, one of the number of deserts that takes up much of the interior of southeastern California, home to national parks like Joshua Tree and Death Valley, and this stretches all the way to the Colorado River and the Arizona border, but it's home to a fair number of people compared to desert regions of other states. Across the transverse range between the Sierra Nevada and Coast Ranges, the massive Central Valley stretches over 400 miles down the length of the state, from Redding in the north to near Bakersfield in the south. Fed by rivers running west out of the Sierra Nevada, it's the most productive agricultural region in the country, an enormous land of orchards, vineyards, and huge industrial farms transformed from irrigation and canals into a crop-growing powerhouse. Its northern region, whose waters flow into the Sacramento River, is the cooler, wetter Sacramento Valley. Its southern half the hotter, drier San Joaquin Valley, whose waters flow into the San Joaquin River. Much of California is naturally hot and dry, and the San Joaquin Valley is no exception. But the Central Valley's limited rainfall, coupled with the abundance of water reaching it through rivers, has enabled farmers through irrigation to control exactly how much water their crops get, allowing it to grow a wide array of different produce. On top of that, while the cold winters of the Midwest limit what can grow there, sunny California has a year-round growing season. While the vast farm states of the Midwest produce mainly corn, wheat, and soy, the Central Valley accounts for a quarter of all food consumed in the United States, including 40% of its fruits, vegetables, and nuts. Everything from almonds to grapes, rice, walnuts, olives, pistachios, plums, and peaches are grown there. It helps make California the most agriculturally productive state in the entire country. $58 billion worth of agricultural goods are produced in California annually, more than any state in the country. More than anywhere else, California, and with it the Central Valley, feeds America. On top of agriculture, California is home to a pretty significant oil industry. It's the 8th largest oil-producing state, and much of the state's oil and natural gas comes from the San Joaquin Valley around Bakersfield, as well as offshore drilling in the Santa Barbara Channel. Up until now, we've explored much of the state, but have encountered very few major cities. Much of California is rural, if not wilderness. As we move west, that changes. 7.2 million people call the Central Valley home, 18% of its population. Millions more, around 78% of all Californians, live on or around the coast from the Bay Area south. On the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley along the Kern River sits the city of Bakersfield, home to 570,000 people in it and its suburbs. Many residents of the Central Valley work in agriculture or energy, and as such live in the urban area but work outside of it, as opposed to most other cities where residents primarily commute from other parts of the urban area into the urban center. Because of this, many agriculturally oriented Central Valley cities are home to large populations but have very small downtowns with relatively limited economic activity in the heart of the city. Bakersfield, for example, is California's 6th largest urban area and is larger than Des Moines, Iowa, but has a far smaller city center. One of California's more mid-sized cities is Bakersfield. This town sits at the very bottom of the San Joaquin Valley at the base of the Tehachapi Pass and is an oil and agricultural town home to around 500,000 people. It's got a large population, but not a super huge downtown, as you can see. This is a few older buildings and everything. Most of its industry is agriculture and oil. Further north, Fresno is a much larger downtown than Bakersfield, but it's smaller than you might expect from California's 5th largest urban area, home to 717,000 people in it and its suburbs, similar to Tulsa or Albuquerque. Between Fresno and Bakersfield are large towns like Porterville, Tulare, Hanford, and Lemoore. Here too sits the lakebed of Tulare Lake. Once the largest lake in the state, this lake, which would occasionally overflow and feed into the San Joaquin, was drained in the late 1800s by a cotton farmer to make more room for farmland and use its water for irrigation. It has occasionally returned during heavy rains, including as recently as 2023. North of Fresno, the San Joaquin Valley is home to more large agricultural towns like Madera, Merced, and Turlock. Modesto, a city on the Tuolumne River, sits further north, home to 357,000 people in its urban area. When you think of California, you probably think of the coasts and beaches, but there's a lot more to the state, and a lot of people actually live pretty far inland. One example of this is the Central Valley. This is where most of the people living in inland parts of California live. Some of them are in larger cities like Sacramento and Fresno. Others are in smaller, more medium-sized cities like Modesto. And this is a classic agricultural and rail town in the northern end of the San Joaquin Valley, south of Stockton and Sacramento, home to around 350,000 people. So not nothing. It's a smaller city, but still with a decently large population. Followed by Manteca, Tracy, and Stockton, a city on the San Joaquin near the edge of the California Delta, with 414,000 people in it and its suburbs. It's not just the largest cities, but a lot of the smaller ones too, which help give California such a large population. This is Stockton. It's the 7th largest urban area in the state, and it's home to about 400,000 people. Stockton sits at the meeting point of the San Joaquin Valley and the California Delta, and this is one of the largest cities in the Central Valley. It's an area that's known for its agriculture, but there's a large population center as well. Lodi, north of Stockton, is the center of the wine-growing part of the Central Valley. Beyond it, though, we reach the Sacramento Valley, the Central Valley's cooler, lusher half in the northern part of the state. At the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers, the city of Sacramento, California's capital city, is by far the valley's largest, home to 1.9 million people in it and its suburbs, many of which stretch east into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. It's the 4th largest urban area in California and the 25th largest in the United States, similar to San Antonio or Orlando.
Now I'm on the Sacramento River. Behind me is the Tower Bridge in the city, right in Old Town Sacramento. Sacramento is the 4th of California's big 4 urban areas. It's also the capital city, but beyond that, it plays a very important role in state history. Not far from here, along the American River, gold was discovered. This California gold rush really led to California's first major influx of settlers and population, really helping grow and spur the growth of the American West in general. And today this is one of California's largest cities. It's the largest in the state, Central Valley, the heart of the real big agricultural producing part of California.
Beyond it are towns like Davis, home to the University of California or UC Davis, Yuba City, and Oroville on the Feather River. Chico, home to California State University or Cal State Chico, Red Bluff, and at the northern tip of the valley, Redding. West of Yuba City stand the Lone Sutter Buttes, an eroded volcanic dome surrounded completely by flat valley that is sometimes dubbed the world's smallest mountain range. The waters of the Sacramento and San Joaquin spill through dozens of sloughs and channels in the center of the valley, between Sacramento and Stockton, a region known as the California Delta, the largest delta on the American West Coast. There they flow as one into an estuary called Suisun Bay, near towns like Fairfield and Vacaville, slice through the coast ranges in a wide channel called the Carquinez Strait, and enter the San Pablo Bay, the northern arm of the enormous inland estuary called the San Francisco Bay. The Bay Area, the region around the bay, is heavily urbanized but home to a number of rural regions as well. The urban Bay Area is home to 5.3 million people, centered on the densely populated, skyscraper-studded city of San Francisco, at the tip of the San Francisco Peninsula along the Golden Gate, the thin strait where the waters of the bay meet the Pacific, but home to two more minor but still important urban hubs: the East Bay city of Oakland, an important port city. One of the smaller cores of the San Francisco Bay Area, the heart of California's East Bay, is the city of Oakland. This sits right on the eastern shore of the San Francisco Bay and is a major port city. The region's major port, an important center of trade and transportation, sits right here in Oakland on the bay. This city, though highly integrated and tied into the cities of San Francisco and San Jose, still remains a distinct part of the state, with its own strong identity. And San Jose, the sprawling tech capital of the state, on the south end of the bay. The Santa Clara Valley, which it sits in, is more widely known as Silicon Valley. While San Francisco is the epicenter of the Bay Area, the largest city proper is San Jose. Now, this is one of the oldest cities in the state of California, and it's the center of the state's technology industry. So much so that Santa Clara Valley is located, more commonly known by its nickname, the Silicon Valley. This is a smaller, more low-density city at the south end of the San Francisco Bay, but it's one of the Bay Area's three real important population centers, for one of the largest cities in the state of California. Suburbs continue to sprawl beyond the East Bay into two thin valleys home to cities like Concord, Walnut Creek, and Dublin, along the Carquinez Strait and Suisun Bay into Antioch, and into the north side of the bay to cities like Vallejo, Sausalito, San Rafael, and Novato. The San Francisco urban area's 5.3 million residents make it the 8th largest urban area in the country, surpassed by only New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Houston, Dallas, and Philadelphia. It's larger than other major American cities like Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Boston, Phoenix, Detroit, and Seattle. The wider Bay Area, beyond just the core urban centers, is home to 7.64 million. The urban heart of Northern California, and arguably the most historic major city on the West Coast, this center of technology and finance is one of the most important major cities in the country and the world. A number of islands, including the iconic prison island of Alcatraz, Angel Island, the historic center of immigration into the country from Asia, Yerba Buena Island, and the connected artificial treasure island built to house the 1939 World's Fair. California's second largest urban area, the second largest on the entire West Coast of the United States, and the 8th largest in the United States as a whole, is the San Francisco Bay Area. The heart of the urban area is the city of San Francisco. It's a densely populated city at the tip of the San Francisco Peninsula, guarding the entrance to the bay. It was from here that hundreds of thousands of people entered California during the gold rush, and it grew into an important port city and the center of Asian immigration into the United States. Today, this is the heart of America's tech boom, a major port city and the center of the country's technology industry. It's a high-earning, expensive place to live, but it's an incredibly popular tourist destination and major West Coast city. Beyond the urban shores of the San Francisco Bay, the western side of the long San Francisco Peninsula is mostly rural, home to small towns like Half Moon Bay, the peninsula's mountains filled with dense redwood forests like Big Basin State Park. North of the Golden Gate, the western side of Marin County is mostly rural as well, home to small fishing towns, redwood forests, dairy farms in the region's rolling hills, and Point Reyes, a beautiful fishhook-shaped peninsula that juts out into the Pacific. The scenic point forms the Gulf of the Farallones, from which the foggy and thin Golden Gate marks the only entrance to the bay. These small, rugged Farallon Islands sit across the Gulf and are protected as a national wildlife refuge. North of the bay, the Petaluma, Sonoma, and Napa valleys stretch north, home to cities of the same names that, though close to the bay, remain disconnected from the urban corridor further south. This is the most famous of California's wine-growing regions. Napa Valley in particular has put California vineyards on the map and helped turn these rural North Bay valleys into the expensive vacation destination that is California wine country. North of Petaluma, the Santa Rosa Plain drains from the Russian River into the Pacific. The city of Santa Rosa is home to around 297,000 people in its urban area. South of the San Francisco Peninsula, the city of Santa Cruz, a surfing destination popular for its beachside boardwalk, sits on the northern end of Monterey Bay. The large, oval-shaped bay presses into the state's coast. At its southern end, the Monterey Peninsula marks the beginning of my home region, the Central Coast, a mostly rural region of small fishing villages, vineyards, ranches, farming communities, and small coastal cities that, partway between the urban centers of Los Angeles and San Francisco, gravitates less strongly towards either the north or south of the state. The urbanized Monterey Peninsula is centered on California's old capital, the small maritime city of Monterey, with 123,000 people in its urban area, and is home as well to the famous golf destination of Pebble Beach. The famous Monterey Bay Aquarium, one of the most well-known aquariums in the country, is located there, as is the popular pier of Fisherman's Wharf.
Today, a fishing and tourist town, Monterey was one of California's most important cities under colonial Spain. This Presidio city, guarding the mouth of Monterey Bay, was California's earliest capital city, its colonial capital, and it's a nice little town on the coast and was a major center of Spanish colonial California.
On the other side, along the smaller Carmel Bay, the town of Carmel by the Sea is a beautiful and wealthy coastal town, popular as an artist's colony. Point Lobos, on the other side of Carmel Bay, marks the beginning of Big Sur, a mountainous, sparsely populated stretch of coast whose stunning cliffs and mountains dive dramatically into the Pacific. Only a few small villages line this rugged stretch of coast, home to beautiful redwood forests, connected by the scenic Highway 1, which spans canyons with a number of impressive bridges, like the Bixby Bridge. Hearst Castle, the luxurious estate of media magnate William Randolph Hearst, looks over the Pacific.
Big Sur is a large stretch of California's central coast that's pretty undeveloped and unpopulated. Here the mountains dive dramatically into the ocean and big canyons and ravines wash out to the sea. This area is known for its cypress trees, sea lions, some of the most beautiful natural scenery in the state. It stretches between Carmel Bay in the north and Morro Bay in the south, and I'm here at the north end in Carmel's Point Lobos. Really beautiful natural little preserve on a small peninsula on the coast.
Across the mountains from Big Sur lies the long, thin Salinas Valley, whose Salinas River empties into Monterey Bay. Made famous by the writings of local author John Steinbeck, this Central Coast Valley is, though far smaller than the Central Valley, incredibly important to California's agricultural dominance. Anytime you eat a salad, odds are you're eating vegetables grown in the Salinas Valley. Nicknamed the Salad Bowl of America, this is the country's vegetable growing epicenter, the source of over half of the country's lettuce, carrots, garlic, asparagus, and celery, nearly half of its broccoli, a third of its spinach, cauliflower, and strawberries, and nearly all of its artichokes and tomatoes used for processing. Sitting at the north end of the valley near Monterey Bay, the agricultural city of Salinas is its largest, home to 177,000 people in its urban area. A string of smaller farming towns like Greenfield and King City stretch further south. Many farm workers in both the Salinas, Central, and other agricultural valleys in the state work difficult jobs for very low wages, and poverty is a major issue across the state's farming regions. The Salinas Valley is also a significant wine-growing region as well, particularly the area around Paso Robles and Atascadero in the south. In the mountains east of the Salinas Valley sits Pinnacles National Park. This park is one of my personal favorites. I grew up spending a lot of time there as a kid. The eroded remains of an ancient volcano, the orange rocks of Pinnacles jut out of the mountains, forming spectacular cliffs and caves. It's a great place to rock climb or spot flocks of the iconic California condor.
California's got 9 national parks. A lot of them are really well known, but there's a few lesser known ones as well. One of my personal favorites is Pinnacles on the central coast of California near Monterey. These are these volcanic plug rocks that have eroded away in the Gavilan Mountains, and it's just a beautiful place. There's some great rock climbing here and a lot of these really incredible volcanic rock formations, as well as caves, lakes, and some great areas to see California condors and more California native wildlife.
Across the mountains from Atascadero, the beautiful Morro Bay, an enclosed estuary whose entrance is guarded over by the volcanic plug of Morro Rock, a towering coastal monolith, sits inland from the larger Estero Bay and marks the southern end of Big Sur. The college town of San Luis Obispo, a short ways inland, is home to Cal Poly, the first of the state's 3 polytechnic universities. South of it sits San Luis Obispo Bay and the Guadalupe-Nipomo Dunes, among the longest stretches of coastal dunes in the country. Further south sit a number of agricultural coastal valleys, the vegetable and wine-growing and cattle ranching Santa Maria Valley, the flower-growing Lompoc Valley, home to Vandenberg Space Force Base, an important West Coast rocket launch site that has sent more rockets to space than anywhere in the U.S. other than Cape Canaveral, and the wine-growing San Ynez Valley. At the San Ynez Valley, the north to south running coast ranges end, meeting the east-west transverse ranges. Here, too, the coastline turns sharply east at Point Conception. For this stretch of the California coast, the Pacific sits to the south, not the west. The beautiful city of Santa Barbara, famed for its Spanish-style architecture, is a popular vacation destination on the coast, nicknamed the American Riviera, home to 202,000 people in it and its suburbs. South of Point Conception, the coast gets sunnier, the beaches sandier, and the fogs so common further north are less so. We're getting into the sunny beach country that the Golden State is known for. Further down the coast, mountains line the Pacific until you reach Ventura and its neighboring city of Oxnard, together home to some 376,000 people in their urban area. Considered the southern edge of the Central Coast, the 2 cities sit just outside the sprawling suburbs of Los Angeles. Both sit, along with Santa Barbara, on the Santa Barbara Channel, a strait separating mainland California from the Channel Islands, by far the state's largest island chain. The northern 4 islands of San Miguel, Santa Rosa, Santa Cruz, and the string of 3 sometimes connected islets called Anacapa, along with the small southern island of Santa Barbara, all make up one of the country's least visited national parks, Channel Islands National Park, which, isolated from the North American mainland, have developed distinct plants and animals like the island fox that don't exist just a few miles across the channel. They're home to beautiful beaches, mountains, and sea caves, and are absolutely worth a visit. The largest of the islands, Santa Cruz Island, is the 8th largest island in the lower 48, as well as the lower 48's tallest. Devil's Peak, its highest mountain, stands taller than any other peak on an American island outside of Alaska, Hawaii, and the Territories. Further south, the remote islands of San Nicolas and San Clemente are naval weapons testing and training facilities. Santa Catalina Island, off the coast of Los Angeles, is the only island with a permanent population. Just around 4,200 people live on Catalina, most in the coastal resort town of Avalon, popular with cruise ships and tourists. Beyond Ventura and Oxnard, we reach the south coast. The urban heart of Southern California, this stretch between the mountains, the Pacific, and the Mexican border, is home to around 20 million people, just over half of the state's entire population. Beyond Ventura and Oxnard, the outer suburbs of Los Angeles like Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, and Santa Clarita line the region's small inland valleys, while the wealthy beach town of Malibu hugs the coast of Point Dume and the large Santa Monica Bay. The city itself is centered on the Los Angeles Basin, a flat, wide plain between the mountains and the ocean, and spills into the San Fernando Valley, the valley of Valley Girl fame. Beyond the suburb of Glendale, the adjacent San Gabriel Valley is home to suburbs like Pasadena. The urban sprawl of LA continues across the plain, home to densely populated suburbs like the beach town of Santa Monica, Culver City, Inglewood, Compton, and Torrance, across the Palos Verdes Peninsula, marking the southern tip of Santa Monica Bay, to the port city of Long Beach, and further south along the coast into Orange County. LA's suburbs in Orange County like Anaheim, Huntington Beach, Santa Ana, and Newport Beach have a distinct local identity, and sitting in the 6th most populous county in the country, often associate more with OC than LA, though they make up an important part of the massive Los Angeles urban area. Similarly to Orange County, the Inland Empire is part of Greater Los Angeles, but has a strong local identity. It sits in a string of hotter, drier valleys across the mountains from LA and Orange County. Home to large urban centers like San Bernardino, Riverside, and Ontario, this inland region isn't entirely urbanized and also includes some farms, ranches, and hills. The San Bernardino Mountains, which line the Inland Empire, are tall and often receive snow in the winter. They're home to the popular ski resort of Big Bear. Between Big Bear, Mammoth, Tahoe, and other ski towns across the state's snowy peaks, California is the country's second biggest ski state. 7 million people ski in the state annually, second to only the skiing giant of Colorado. Across the mountains from the Inland Empire lies the Mojave. Like the Bay Area, the Los Angeles area is so large that its physically massive urban area is often divided into several different and unique regions with their own urban centers, all tied to the core city. Altogether, LA's enormous urban area is home to 14.5 million people, more than 121 different countries, and astonishingly, every U.S. state except for Texas, Florida, New York, and California itself. Shockingly, even the population giants of Pennsylvania and Illinois are home to fewer people than this sprawling metropolis. However you square it, whether by urban area, which I prefer, metro area, or population within the city limits, Los Angeles is California's largest city and the second largest in the entire United States, after just New York. Home to a third of all Californians, it's the country's entertainment and media capital, a major port and manufacturing center. Along with New York, it's one of just 2 U.S. urban areas considered a megacity, an urban area with more than 10 million residents. The 24th largest urban area in the world, the 5th largest in the Americas, after just Sao Paulo, Mexico City, New York City, and Buenos Aires, and the largest in the entire Western Hemisphere that sits on the Pacific Ocean.
Now, one of the states that's grown most with the rise of the Sun Belt is California. Here in Los Angeles, the city is now the second largest in the United States. It's a mega city, home to millions and millions of people. But decades ago, it was a much smaller city, yet to surpass other massive urban areas like Chicago. Much of its development is far more recent, and suburban areas and new housing developments have sprawled out across the Los Angeles plain into nearby valleys and hills.
South of Orange County, after a small gap in Southern California's urban sprawl, we reach Oceanside, Carlsbad, Escondido, Encinitas, and the other northern suburbs of California's third largest urban area, San Diego. With 3.07 million people in its suburbs, it's the country's 15th largest, smaller than Seattle but larger than Minneapolis-St. Paul. The largest city on the Mexican border and the busiest international border crossing in the country, it surrounds the excellent natural harbor of San Diego Bay, the state's third largest enclosed estuary after the San Francisco and Humboldt Bays. An important naval center, the U.S. Navy's Third Fleet gives the sunny beachside city a major military presence.
Where I'm standing right now, Point Loma, is arguably the birthplace of colonial California. When Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo landed here in 1542, he became the first European to set foot in what would become the west coast of the United States. Point Loma guards the entrance to San Diego Bay, right behind me. It was one of the finest natural harbors on the west coast and would allow the city that the Spanish founded there, San Diego, to develop into a major city. Today, the third largest urban area in the state of California, its strategic location enabling it to become an important military center and one of the largest cities in the United States.
Today, California is the most populous national subdivision, state, province, territory in the entire North American continent. Interestingly enough, long before the colonization of the Americas by Europeans, it likely was once again a continental population center. The arrival of the Europeans brought disease and bloodshed, upending indigenous life on the continent. Though it's thought that around 90% of North America's native people were killed from disease, the best historians and archaeologists can do to describe population numbers beforehand is to provide estimates, often ranging widely. It's similarly difficult to know how population sizes differed across regions, but many estimates place California as among the more populous parts, if not the most populous part, of what would become the United States before Europeans arrived. Many estimate that the state was home to around 300,000 native people, which would have made it one of the largest population centers in the country. What we are more certain about is the stunning diversity of the state's native people. We've covered countless indigenous peoples so far as we've traversed the United States, and while each of these different groups possess their own culture, traditions, history, and self-identity, and many speak their own languages, many of their languages are part of related language families. For example, the Iroquoian languages in the St. Lawrence Valley, the Algonquian languages in much of Canada and the East Coast, the Siouan languages in much of the Midwest and Great Plains, and the Uto-Aztecan languages in much of the Mountain West. In California, however, with incredibly distinct regions separated by little more than a single mountain range, native people spoke dozens of completely unrelated languages. It was far and away the most linguistically diverse part of what would become the United States, Canada, or Mexico. The Chumash, for example, who live in the central coast around Point Conception in the Channel Islands, were the only speakers of languages in the Chumashan family. Just to the north, the Salinan people spoke Salinan, the only language of the Salinan family. North of them, the Esselen, whose homeland made up a tiny chunk of northern Big Sur in the Salinas Valley, spoke the only language of the Esselen family. While some larger language families called the Hokan and Penutian families have been theorized to include some of these languages, most linguists believe that most of California's native people spoke so-called language isolates, languages that, fascinatingly, are completely unrelated to any other language on the planet. Otherwise, many tribes of the California deserts spoke Uto-Aztecan languages, while some in the North Coast spoke Na-Dene languages, otherwise found far away in the Navajo and Apache of the Southwest, and the Athabascans of Alaska and northern Canada. Living mostly in small lands on the mountain valleys and coast, California was home to well over 100 different indigenous cultures. For the sake of time, I won't be going into every single one, but I will name a few. The Yokuts lived in the San Joaquin Valley. The deserts were home to the Shoshone, Cahuilla, Serrano, Quechan or Yuma, Mojave, and Paiute, including the Chemehuevi. Tribes like the Mono, Miwok, Washoe, Shasta, and Modoc lived in the Sierra Nevada and Cascades. The Tolowa, Yurok, Pomo, and Coast Miwok lived in the North Coast, Salinan and Chumash in the Central Coast, and peoples like the Luiseno, Tongva, and Kumeyaay in the South Coast. Today, around 1.6% of Californians are Native American, the 11th highest proportion in the country and the largest in any video we've covered so far. With such a large population in the state overall, California is home today to 630,000 Native Americans, more than any other state and nearly twice as many as the state with the second largest population, Oklahoma. Most indigenous people in California, though, are not descended from people native to the state, but from native Mexicans who immigrated to the state or from Cherokee and other Oklahoma native people who fled west during the Dust Bowl. By the early 1500s, Spanish conquistadors were searching for gold and territory in North America. Though they began their colonization of the continent in the Caribbean, by 1521 conquistador Hernán Cortés toppled the powerful Aztec Empire, or Mexica, and declared a colony of New Spain, the massive Mexica capital of Tenochtitlan, now the colonial capital of Mexico City. However, a rival conquistador was granted lands further to the north. For Cortés to come upon gold, like other Spaniards had found in Peru, he would have to try even further, to the islands of the Pacific. Cortés sent off ships, and they returned with news of one such island. Perhaps they reached the Indies, the islands Columbus had sought out when he first reached the Americas. Cortés followed them west. In 1535, he landed on this large island, like the fantastical island of California in that popular book Las Sergas de Esplandian. He must be just east of the Indies. California, this island's name would be. Until now, California had not been a real place, and this California wasn't even an island, let alone one of the Indies, as later Spanish expeditions up its coast would discover, even though mapmakers would still continue to show it as an island for quite some time. In fact, the place Cortés landed, claimed for Spain, and named California is not even the U.S. state of California today, but rather the Mexican peninsula of Baja California. But Cortés's name would stick for the region. The inland channel that separated it from the rest of New Spain would be called the Gulf of California, and as Spain continued to press north, the lands they found north of the peninsula would also be called California. In 1540, Spaniard Hernando de Alarcón sailed up the Gulf of California and into the Colorado River. There he reached a major tributary, the Gila, near what is now Yuma, Arizona, and turned around. There in the Colorado Desert, he saw into the very southeastern tip of what is now the Golden State. 3 years later, the maybe Portuguese, maybe Spanish explorer Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, sailing for Spain, went up the coast of the peninsula, looking for a northwest passage, a straight or even a wide river that could provide a shortcut across the continent to provide easier access to the Pacific and the Indies that lay beyond. He found no such passage, but did discover a fantastic enclosed natural harbor, a protected bay that Spain could use as a port. He named it San Miguel. There at the bay, now called San Diego, he became the first European to set foot in what is now California. He continued north to the Channel Islands and further up the coast, all the way to Point Reyes, where, forced to turn back, he found Monterey Bay. Its thin entrance blanketed in fog, he and many European explorers after him would completely miss the coast's best harbor, the San Francisco Bay. He died in the Channel Islands, and despite his discoveries, Spain didn't seem too interested in this upper coast of California. That changed with the Spanish colonization of the Philippines. These spice-rich islands were just what Spain had been hoping to bring into their control. The journey there from New Spain was easy enough, but crossing back over the Pacific, winds made the return trip near impossible. In 1565, though, Spain found that by crossing the Pacific further north of the Philippines, easier winds would take these valuable Manila galleons back to New Spain, usually somewhere in California. If these galleons encountered trouble, Spain would need California harbors for them to land safely in. They sent more explorers like Sebastián Vizcaíno to survey more of this upper California coast. He chose most of the names for the bays and islands and points that remain to this day. The Manila galleons, though, brought interest from other powers, namely the English. Sir Francis Drake, an English pirate, had been sent to cause trouble in New Spain, even capturing a galleon. On the run from the angry Spaniards, he landed his ship in a small harbor off Point Reyes, today called Drake's Bay. There he claimed it for England, and named it New Albion, using the old Latin name for England. Now, this claim was just that, a claim, but it's not as if Spain had any permanent presence in the region either. In fact, while they built missions in the southern peninsular part of the region, the north remained practically untouched, a wild coast where the Manila galleons would pass by and occasionally dock on their way home to New Spain. California north of the peninsula, or the British New Albion, remained uncolonized by either power. It would remain the case for the next century and a half, until the Catholic order of the Franciscans moved in. Majorcan friar Junipero Serra was picked by Spain to construct a string of missions north of the peninsula. Gaspar de Portola, a Catalan military commander, was chosen to govern this new Spanish province. The already colonized peninsula became known as Old or Antigua California. The wilderness to the north, New or Nueva California. Together, these two regions would be governed as one province, Portola as the governor, called Las Californias. In 1769, more than 200 years after Cabrillo had first set foot there, Portola and Serra met at San Diego Bay. Portola sailed north, instructed to build a military outpost at Monterey Bay. Serra would continue up the coast on foot, founding a string of religious outposts called missions, communities where local native Californians would be forced to work, convert to Christianity, learn Spanish, and in the eyes of Spain, become loyal Spanish subjects. The Spanish also brought with them a plant, a wild oak grass to feed livestock, that spread like wildfire throughout the region. Today, like the valley oak, eucalyptus tree, or California poppy, it's ubiquitous across much of California, turning its hills a golden color in the summer. Serra founded his first mission, San Diego de Alcalá, there near the San Diego Bay. A member of Portola's expedition, Jose Ortega, climbing to the top of a hill, saw before himself a vast expanse of water, on the other side of the mountains from the coast. Hidden for centuries by fog, Spain had finally found the San Francisco Bay, some 200 years after they began exploring the Nueva California coast. Portola, meanwhile, reached the small peninsula at the southern end of Monterey Bay and founded a town called Monterey. From the coastal city, Serra would continue to oversee the construction of his Franciscan missions as they crept their way north, connected by a series of roads today known as the King's Highway, El Camino Real. Eventually, these would include 21 different missions, stretching all the way from San Diego de Alcalá north to San Francisco Solano in today's Sonoma, each built a day's walk from the last. These beautiful Catholic churches were the cornerstones of the Spanish presence in California, but by no means were they an honorable institution. The native people brought to the missions were forced to work hard labor for no pay, were not allowed to leave, and were frequently met with violence by the Spanish missionaries. All this for the purpose of stripping them of their culture, faith, language, and traditional ways of life in order to assimilate as subjects of a conquering power. This is not just my 21st century view. Foreign explorers at the time also recorded their own criticisms of the mission system.
The mission system was key to Spanish colonialism in California. A string of missions up the coast, following a route known as El Camino Real, allowed Spaniards to convert native people to Christianity, often forcibly and through slavery. Cities developed around missions and forts called presidios, and Santa Barbara had both. Behind me is Mission Santa Barbara, known as the Queen of the Missions, and today the city, renowned for its Spanish-style architecture, is a popular resort and vacation destination along California's coast.
For Spain, they were critical to the successful colonization of Nueva California. Beyond just religious conversion, these were Spanish outposts providing food, shelter, connected by roads to one another and to harbors like the San Francisco and San Diego bays. To defend these colonies, Spain built forts, or presidios, near a few of their missions. Together, these 4 fortifications became some of Nueva California's most important colonial sites, one at San Diego, another on San Francisco Bay, built in 1776, the same year British colonists on the other side of the continent declared their independence, another at Monterey, and another at Santa Barbara. Beyond their military importance, these presidios were settlements, colonial towns home to Spanish families. Each was responsible for the defense of a military district encompassing the Spanish settlements in the surrounding region. Spanish colonial settlements revolved around 2 things, the mission and the presidio. While the mission was a religious center, the presidio was a military outpost, a fort. Today I'm at San Francisco's Presidio, placed at strategic locations often near missions. These are where California's Spanish cities would develop. Today, the Presidio guards the entrance to the bay at the Golden Gate, right at the foot of the Golden Gate Bridge. In 1777, the capital city of Las Californias was moved from Loreto, down in the peninsula of Antigua, California, to Monterey. With the missions and now several colonial towns, Nueva California was no longer a new, unexplored frontier, but a region equally important to its southern counterpart. Spaniards began calling this northern region Upper or Alta California instead. Antigua California became Lower or Baja California. There was a final piece yet to the colonial puzzle, the pueblo, an agricultural community meant to provide extra food to feed the soldiers of the presidios. Spain founded 2 of these towns, one in the north and one in the south. San Jose de Guadalupe, or San Jose, at the south end of the San Francisco Bay, and one on a flat coastal plain near Mission San Gabriel Arcangel. They gave it a very long name, the Town of Our Lady, Queen of the Angels, of the Porciúncula River. In Spanish, El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora, la Reina de los Ángeles, del Río de Porciúncula. The Los Angeles part would stick. Beyond these settlements, farmers grazed sheep and cattle on large ranchos or ranches. There were also 2 other missions located in Alta California but governed by the authorities in neighboring Nueva Navarra, which they sat just across the Colorado River from. A road through them connected these desert missions among the Quechan people to the rest of New Spain, built by Basque explorer Juan Bautista de Anza. It was the only path over land that connected the colonial settlements of the California coast to the other colonies of New Spain. In 1781, though, Quechan people living in the 2 Colorado River missions revolted, killing most of the Spaniards who lived there and destroying the missions. With it, Spain lost control of the region as well as the road that went through it to California. The province of Las Californias now was accessible only by sea, cut off by land from the rest of New Spain. By 1804, Alta California had become a distinctly different region from the peninsula of Baja California, revolving around its own cities and centers of power, like the Californian capital of Monterey. That year, Spain made official what had been increasingly clear, splitting the province into 2 different Californias, Baja California and Alta California, with a border not far south of San Diego. Monterey would remain its capital city. Alta California was a huge province, its borders continuing along the Gila River in today's Arizona, following roughly the modern Arizona-New Mexico border in the east, and even dipping into eastern Colorado and the southwestern corner of Wyoming, as well as containing all of Nevada and Utah. Alta California was the largest province in New Spain, but arguably had the smallest colonial footprint. It was home to hundreds of thousands of native people, some of whom lived under Spanish rule in the missions, but most of whom were completely independent. Only a few thousand Spaniards lived there, mostly in the colonial towns of the coast, like Monterey, Santa Barbara, San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Jose. 90% of the province's inhabitants were indigenous, the highest proportion of any Spanish province, and the other 10% were mestizo, descendants of marriages between Spaniards and native people. For these few thousand mestizo colonial subjects, it was a frontier life, completely cut off by road from the centers of population far away to the southeast. To other colonial powers, Spain's grip on this vast frontier province was tenuous, and their investment in it minimal. One burgeoning empire took note. Over the course of the last few centuries, Russia had expanded east, the modestly large Eastern European country, conquering and colonizing the native peoples of Siberia in an imperial campaign that took them all the way to the Pacific. In the late 1700s, they crossed the Bering Sea into North America, founding the colony of Russian America in the region they called Alyeska. Russian Alaska was mostly a fur trading colony. Like Alta California, it was mostly home to native people. The small population of Russian fur traders often married into native families, their descendants known as Alaskan Creoles. The hunt for sea otters made the colony quite profitable, but like the Spanish presidios, food in the icy Arctic was hard to come by. Russian hunters and traders made their way south from Alaska down the California coast, even discovering Humboldt Bay. And in 1812, Russian fur traders built Rossiya, Russian for Russia, an agricultural settlement and military fortification not far north of Point Reyes. Fort Ross, as others called it, was an essential part of their American colonies. The fort, high on the bluffs, was easy to defend but not a great port, so they built a small settlement further south to ship out their furs and produce, called Port Rumiantsev. Today it's called Bodega Bay. They even had a sealing station on the Farallones, right at the mouth of the San Francisco Bay. Fort Ross was home to several hundred people, and it was a multicultural town. As much as it was Russian, it was an Alaskan settlement, home to a mix of ethnic Russians, Alaskan Creoles, Aleut people from the Aleutian Islands, as well as local Miwok and Pomo people.
Numerous powers have laid claim to or explored parts of California throughout the state's long history. Britain, Spain, Mexico, the United States. One you might not think of is Russia. Their main North American colony was Alaska, located far to the north, but they actually established a colonial center here in California in Sonoma County. This is Fort Ross. From here, Russia traded furs and pelts hunted in Alaska. They sent a large number of Russians and native Alaskans here to colonize the area and grow crops from which to supply their Alaska colony. It was an essential center of trade that connected Russia and especially the Alaska colony within the global economy and the trade networks that existed in colonial North America.
The Spanish were furious. Russia had blatantly encroached into territory they claimed, not far away from their own colonial settlements. But there was nothing they could do. Spain had neglected the colony, and this new Russian colony proved just how weak their hold on the region really was. In fact, as Russia had been setting up shop on the Pacific, the colonial subjects of New Spain were waging a war for independence. Though its battles were fought far away from the frontier lands of Alta California, by 1821, when the Long War ended, it was part of a new independent nation, Mexico. After a brief period under an emperor, Mexico became a constitutional republic in 1824. The old Spanish provinces became states, but the massive frontier land of Alta California was demoted to a territory, along with neighboring Baja California and Nuevo Mexico. Monterey would stay its territorial capital. The multicultural country with large mestizo, indigenous, and Spanish populations declared equal rights for all people, and the California missions were a glaring violation of these principles. This was made ever more clear after a successful revolt in 1824 saw the Chumash take over the San Ynez, La Purísima, and Santa Barbara missions for several months. Under Governor Jose Figueroa, all the Alta California missions were secularized and shut down. Many were abandoned and faded into disrepair. The former residents typically settled outside of the mission walls, founding towns around the mission grounds like Sonoma and San Luis Obispo. The missions had owned huge swaths of rural land, which the Figueroa government granted to farmers and ranchers, encouraging more settlement in the territory. Some of this land was laid out for new towns. One, a bayside town on the San Francisco Peninsula, southeast of the Presidio, was named Yerba Buena, sitting on a small cove of the same name. The British Hudson's Bay Company, a fur trading giant, built a trading post in the town, and it became a popular place to dock. Elsewhere in Mexico, though, turmoil was engulfing the young nation. Hoping to bring more settlers into another frontier region, the state of Coahuila y Tejas, Mexico encouraged Americans from the neighboring southern states to immigrate. Many did, soon surpassing the Mexican population in the area they called Texas. These Americans often flagrantly violated Mexican laws, introducing slavery, a horrible practice illegal in Mexico, to Texas. At the same time, Mexico's republic had fallen into military dictatorship under a general named Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. A number of states declared independence, but Texas was the only one to do so successfully. By 1836, rebels in the border state successfully defeated Santa Anna's forces and took the dictator prisoner, where they negotiated the independence of the new Republic of Texas. The new republic considered this sufficient, but Mexico's Congress had to approve the treaty to make it legitimate under Mexican law. Because Santa Anna had been held prisoner when he signed the treaty, they viewed it as foul play and refused to sign it. This created a conundrum. Texas functionally was an independent country and acted and governed itself as such. Other countries like France, Britain, and most importantly, the United States recognized its independence. But to Mexico, it was an illegitimate state, rightfully part of Mexico. Beyond that, Texas claimed land that it didn't control, and was never considered before to have been part of the state, including some far eastern reaches of Alta California. At the same time, the Texan population were primarily English-speaking Americans and their descendants, and the American president, John Tyler, was an expansionist, believing it was the country's manifest destiny to expand its shores all the way to the Pacific, even through Mexico. It was a disaster waiting to happen. It all reached a boiling point in 1845, when the Texan government decided it would be safer under American rule. A deal was signed, and President John Tyler admitted Texas as the 28th state. In Mexico's eyes, a piece of their land had just been annexed. In the meantime, Alta and Baja California had been recombined and later split again by the Mexican government and faced two revolutions of their own. In 1829, a soldier named Joaquin Solis had seized Monterey in protest of Mexico's failure to pay Californio soldiers. In 1836, Californios, as the people of the Mexican territory were known, ousted two unpopular governors. Led by an independence leader named Juan Bautista Alvarado, they successfully overthrew the territorial government. This young revolutionary assumed the presidency of the newly independent country of Alta California and raised a new flag with a lone red star on a white field over Monterey. His presidency lasted just 1 year. Alvarado would negotiate with the Mexican government and accept the reintroduction of Alta California as a Mexican state with him as governor. But the weakness of Mexican rule could not be clearer. Californios largely despised the Santa Anna regime and Mexican control in general. So far from Mexico City, in a territory largely disconnected, separated by vast deserts from the Mexican centers of power and population, they identified more as Californios than as Mexicans. In 1844, Alta California's new territorial governor, Manuel Micheltorena, marched into Alta California to assume the governorship, bringing an army with him into the rebellious territory that looted a number of Californio farms. Former President Alvarado formed an army of Californios to oppose this already unpopular governor and defeated Micheltorena near the San Fernando Valley. Having ousted the Mexican governor, the Californios chose their own governor, Pio Pico, who moved the capital to Los Angeles, while another leader, Jose Castro, ruled the north of Alta California as a de facto separate territory out of Monterey. Amidst all this chaos, a new population was joining the Californios and native people of Alta California, English-speaking Americans were crossing the Sierra Nevada. Fur traders had made their way to the largely self-governed wilderness north of California called Oregon Country for quite some time. But now, following a series of pathways leaving Independence, Missouri, connecting forts and trading posts across one of the best passes in the Rockies, modern Wyoming's South Pass, wagon trains of American pioneers had begun to follow them, seeking out land in Oregon Country. Another group, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, fled to exile and persecution in Illinois. Hoping to leave the United States altogether, they crossed South Pass as well, carving out a Mormon trail to a new homeland, which they called Deseret, along Alta California's Great Salt Lake. Other settlers began following the Mormon Trail as well before it met up with the Oregon Trail. At Fort Hall, in what is now Pocatello, Idaho, one wagon train realized in 1841 that they could leave the Oregon Trail, cross into Alta California, and follow the route of the Humboldt River through the desert into the Sierra Nevada. There they could cross a pass in the mountains and reach the promising lands of the Central Valley and the Alta California coast. Two American explorers, John C. Fremont and Kit Carson, followed them and mapped this new California trail. Wagon trains of Americans would follow. One, the Donner Party, made the mistake of taking an untested shortcut, which added significant time to the journey. They got stuck at the summit of the Sierra Nevada in the dead of winter, and unable to make it down until the snow thawed, endured a terrifying winter at a lake that now bears their name. As you are likely well aware, they did not all make it out of the mountains. Many Americans would still follow the pass they took through the Sierra Nevada, and if you've ever driven the I-80 from Reno to Sacramento, you've taken Donner Pass too. These American immigrants were a substantial community in the lightly populated territory, but few at this point had taken the California Trail, and many of these early American immigrants purchased large farms and ranches from the Mexican land grants. The same year the Donner Party became stranded along the California Trail, war broke out between the U.S. and Mexico over Texas. John C. Fremont had been sent by President James Knox Polk, supposedly to explore the Mexican territory, likely to organize armed forces should war break out. It seems he jumped the gun, marching on Monterey before war itself had begun. He wasn't the first. 4 years earlier, Thomas Abb Catesby Jones, mishearing that a war had started, sailed on Monterey and took the capital without a shot fired. Learning that there was indeed no war, he'd returned the territory in embarrassment. But war now had actually begun. Rumors spread that Mexico would expel American immigrants from Alta California, and a group of them, led by American William B. Hyde, marched on Sonoma. There they met with Californio General Mariano Vallejo. Like many Californios, Vallejo opposed Mexican rule and was supportive of the possibility of an independent or even an American California. Instead of accepting the important leader's help, the American rebels took Vallejo prisoner. Capturing the Presidio of Sonoma, they raised a new flag, depicting a bear, over the city, and declared the independence of the California Republic. Unlike in Texas, it appears the leaders of the Bear Flag Revolt were less serious about Californian independence, and after just 25 days, the California Republic had joined forces with the invading American troops, and the Stars and Stripes were raised over Sonoma. American ships took Monterey and Yerba Buena, renaming the small port town San Francisco, while troops led by Fremont, Robert F. Stockton, and Stephen Watts Kearny eventually took San Diego and Los Angeles, despite a power struggle between Kearny, Fremont, and Stockton. Though Alta California had been decisively captured by the Americans, the most strategic victory was far to the south, where General Winfield Scott captured Mexico City. The Mexican capital itself had fallen. The Mexican-American War was over, and with this important bargaining chip in hand, the U.S. and Mexico negotiated the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Mexico lost the northern half of its territory, and the United States increased its land by 1/3. Not only did Mexico now recognize Texas as a legitimate American state, but its two vast northern territories, Nuevo Mexico and Alta California, were turned over to the United States. The only California in U.S. control, the Americans would drop the Alta from its name. Much of the American West would be carved from this Mexican cession, one of the largest ever expansions of U.S. territory. But neither Mexico nor the United States truly knew the extent of the wealth, the opportunity that was being handed over at the stroke of a pen. For just 9 days before, a carpenter named James Marshall, building a mill in the Sierra Nevada, had found something that would change California forever. That is where I'm going to leave off with part 1 of California, the U.S. Explained. Part 2 will be up within the next few days, so keep an eye out for its release. I hope you watch it to get the full story of this fascinating and incredibly influential state. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you learned something new. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover the countries, cities, people, and places of the world and beyond. These videos will leave you saying, "That is interesting."